You know that song? It's a beautiful song.
Yeah. I just heard it last week, actually. Yeah.
Remind it to us.
I'll find it
Okay.
if you want to, but not now. But it's
Okay.
just a beautiful.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
So we want to. So our spiritual growth basically is not like the president said it. The Israel president said it in a very nice way this week. He said we're entering the 10 days of holiness, that are the parallel. It's his invention, but it was just so beautifully said. Which are the 10 parallel days to Aseret Yemei Tshuva. We have the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that we consider as holy. So before the day of the memorial of the Holocaust, he said we're entering the 10 days of holiness, which is between the Holocaust Day and the Independence Day. And and even though it's not it sounds like a religious statement, but it isn't. It's more like a spiritual statement. And it's just so beautiful, because the truth is, like the biggest downfall of mankind is of every individual, is when we want to get to the mountain and we don't understand that life is a process, and we want everything now. We want our kidnapped people now. We want our soldiers back at home now. We want the war to end now. We want peace on earth now. We want my health to be 100% excellent, or at least 80% excellent now. We want everything now. And we know that it doesn't work that way. You didn't get your first degree now. You worked hard for it. You got your second degree. You worked hard for it. You got a good job. You worked hard for it. You got your retirement money, you worked very hard for it, right? Life is a process. And when we learn Torah, it sets the ground to understand that idea, right? It's like you can learn all those things through the process of life, or you can read the Torah and it gives it to you basically on a golden platter. And if you read it and accept it to your heart from first day when you're young, right? To understand that this is what life is. Life is hard work. Life is hard work spiritually and materialistically. And if you're ready to accept that, then everything becomes a little bit less painful, because you're always in that feeling of life as a process. Nobody got, like I many times talk to people, why is that one rich and why is that one this and why, like they worked hard for it. They didn't get it on a golden platter, right? Maybe there are some people who were born into whatever, but also they have it hard. In another way, they have it hard. Would anybody choose Harry's destiny or William's destiny or Diana's destiny? Would you trade with her? So it's like everybody's got their, and what is it that we're here for? We're here to grow. We're here to manifest, a different personality, to make ourselves true adults. Like what is an adult in Hebrew? Mevugal, right? Comes from lehit bager, which is to grow up. And lehit bager is the same letters as lehit gaber, to overcome.
Wow.
What makes me grow is overcoming difficulties.
That's beautiful.
Right? And that's what makes me a true, mature adult person. Right?
Lehit
Bager is to grow up. Comes with as lehit gaber, with the bet and the gimel.
The gevra.
Switch. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is what we're trying to teach our children and grandchildren, right? And if we get better, talking of Sfirat HaOmer, if we get better, at balancing our chesed and gevura, right? Go ahead.
I was wondering why you hadn't mentioned the Sfirat HaOmer.
Here I am, right? Chesed and gevura, right? It's like, it's always interesting to see how, like how there is a transformation, a generational transformation, and how people talk to each other, right? We had visited my husband's parents the other day, And it's like interesting to see how, and my youngest son was with us. And whatever, he's going through his own teenage struggles and right. And I see like in a little bit, like I caught myself talking a little bit like his parents used to talk some years ago, but now they've grown older and, and they already don't talk so harsh, and it's like, how much are we balancing our chesed and gvura, how much are we learning to give over the same message in a softer way, in a way that will be accepted by the heart and not be pushed away and not be thrown away.
I just want to say one thing. I mean, not everybody here's on all of your lists yet, but try to get on her list because she's doing the Omer every day.
Right.
And doing it in a way I've never seen. She'll go through a description, but then she'll tell you what to do, how you could change things, but it's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's one of her lists.
What I'm sending. Yeah, what I'm
sending.
sending. Yeah, you're on the list. Yeah.
I'm on the list.
Is this Sima Jacobson's list? He has a book.
There are many
No,
books
she's
on
her
it.
own version.
There are many books. I also wrote a book. It's in Hebrew. It's translated to English, but it's not published yet in English. And in the meantime, I wrote a whole new set of, daily whatever. So it's probably going to be another book. I'm very bad on publishing. I love writing. I hate all the,
It came to me this year for the first time about the Omer. And how, when I first started counting the Omer, it was within the minhag that I learned to put a little grain of wheat on the calendar, like you're harvesting. I'm like, what are we harvesting? We're harvesting midot.
right? Maturity.
Maturity. And it's like, so, like, isn't that awesome? Every day you can harvest a little something.
And you can pay attention to a little nuance in my heart and my consciousness and how I perceive the world and how my people perceive me also through my behavior, right? What kind of energy am I setting into the world that, I'm like, I might ask, why does this person, that person treating me this way or another? But there's a certain energy that I'm sending there that is just being a mirror back in my face, right?
Yeah.
So that's like, which brings me to the next story, right? So we were talking about Job. And Job is, like we said, is basically an allegory of every, of the growing through the pain of each and every one of us, basically. And so anybody here doesn't know in a vague way at least what Job is about? Everybody read Job a little bit here or there? Yeah? Okay. So there was a Rebbe, his name was the Rebbe of Sokolov. He lived from 1866 to 1939. And he was a disciple of the Kotzker Hasidus. Yeah, the Kotzker Hasidus was quite a harsh one. Unlike, Hasidus is usually resembled with softness and sweetness. But Kotzk was a very harsh one. The Kotzker Rebbe was so harsh with his Hasidim that all of them left him in his life. And for the last 20 years, he basically lived in solitude. And he would only come out for a minyan, and people would come and give him a minyan, but he didn't feel like talking to anybody, and nobody felt like talking to him. Mm-hmm. And and because he was fighting for absolute truth. He was like totally authentic and totally for absolute truth. But it's like Reb Nachman softens that understanding with a beautiful saying that there is emet la'amita, and shalom, which is truth, the truth of the truth, and then there is peace. There are basically 3 layers to truth. When the aspiration is to move towards peace. So if you're only fighting for truth, but you disregard peace, you're missing the point. Mm-hmm. The point is that we should all be able to live with what God gives us, and the whole picture is you and me and him and her. and everything that we all bring into the world, it's all godly, it's all God. And we need to learn to move from this absolute authenticity and desire for truth to peace. So what? Yeah, go ahead.
What was the middle, Emet? You said Emet?
Emet la'amita.
Lamita?
Le'amita. The truth of the truth. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So how does Reb Nachman explain those three stages? By saying emet is basically what the story is. Let's take a story, somebody stole something from a store, right? The truth is that he stole something from a store. Then there is, we don't approve of that, right? And we don't want to educate people to steal, God forbid, right? But then what is the truth of the truth? The truth of the truth, he had hungry children at home, right? And maybe the truth of the truth is that nobody gave him any tzedakah and his baby was dying of hunger. Maybe that is the truth of the truth.
With Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
Remind me?
How many years was he stuck in a cave?
12 something?
All of his life?
Right.
Terror, no less.
Well, it was 13.
13.
Hiding from the Romans.
Right.
He came out after a number of years, and there was so much hope. They said he was holier than Moshe Rabbeinu, closer to Hashem. But he saw a farmer working in the field and doing some sort of averah.
No, not even an averah.
He
was judging people for not sitting and learning Torah and aspiring to spirituality.
Fire came out from his eyes and burned the man to a crisp.
Died.
I don't know who said, go back in your cave and learn
Hashem.
Torah.
Hashem said, you have learned nothing.
That's not
Right? So I'll just say in parenthesis, if you've already mentioned that story, I'll say in parenthesis that it says that there was another Rebbe who also lived about just before the Holocaust, and his name was the Rebbe of Alexander. I mean, there was a whole lineage of them, but the last one lived up until the Holocaust. And he said that, and one of his students said, in Alexander, I learned all these holy Torahs. But in Auschwitz, I understood what my Rebbe was talking about. Right? So it's like, we're like, climbing up the mountain doesn't mean, I'm like in this nirvana of like meditation and learning Torah and whatever, Climbing up the mountain is like living through the struggles in a godly way, like we were saying today, la'asok b'divrei Torah, to deal with life in a Torah-dic way, in the way the Torah teaches me. That's what I aspire to sit just calmly, like, we imagine Avram Avinu sitting there in front of the tent, having the most exalting moment with Hashem, and then what does he do? Runs and feeds the three angels that actually look like idol worshippers. That's the true serving of Hashem, is running and feeding them. It's not just sitting there in nirvana. So, and that's what Rabbi Shimon didn't understand. That those people going to the field, like I look through these, I'll take it to our world for a moment, right? I'm looking at all these people who opened their store with unbelievable emunah in the last 5 years, with first COVID and then the war, and filled up their restaurants with food. Forget the stores. Okay, let's say the clothes won't go bad, right? But the restaurants, to fill up your restaurant with food, not knowing what the next decree of the day is going to be, right? Wasting hundreds and hundreds and thousands of shekels on food that you don't know if you'll be full or empty. What kind of level of emunah, right? So with the first perception of Rabbi Shimon, you could come and say, go and sit in yeshiva and whatever, learn Torah and meditate and pray, 24/7. And with the after perception of Rabbi Shimon, of the extra year in the cave, right, of understanding that the real true service of Hashem is that. So going back to emet la'amita, and shalom, so we say, so he stole the food, but emet la'amita, he had hungry children, a dying baby at home, God forbid, from hunger. And the third level is Hashem's level, which is shalom. Shalom is also God's name. So the third level is shalom, which is in Shmoneh Esrei, we say, Melech o'ev tzedakah u'mishpat. Hashem is the king who loves tzedakah and judgment in the same breath. How can tzedakah and judgment go in the same breath? In Hashem's world, it's possible. We can only aspire to it, hopefully touch on it for a few seconds in life, But this is our aspiration. Our desire is to maximize those moments where we can live into tzedakah and the judgment in the most balanced way, like Hashem does.
It makes sense. I'm sorry. The tzedakah can be, there's 8 or 9 levels. There's so many levels of it, but the level of anonymous is in judgment. But the level of looking at someone and saying, do they deserve my money? That's judgment. So
Right.
you can
Right.
play it.
And it doesn't matter if they deserve my money or not. What matters is that Hashem is putting them in front of me, giving me the opportunity to open up another crack in my heart and to become a little more compassionate and to become a little bit less judgmental and to become whatever, just to grow.
Talk for a second about why we have to ask forgiveness of the person we're giving tzedakah to.
Ask forgiveness. I never heard about that. Please fill me in.
Oh wow! I was asking you because I was having trouble pulling it together. If anybody else knows,
I know saying thank you to the person that we're giving tzedakah
thank
to.
you. Yeah.
And apologize if we don't have stuff.
Yeah. Right.
Not if we're giving it.
it has something to do with the personal pride of the person who has to ask for tzedakah. And my giving it to him, in a way, is making him feel beholden to me, and I don't want him to feel that. So I have to ask forgiveness
Beautiful.
from him.
Beautiful.
I think
That's beautiful
And that's
addition.
on the lowest level of tzedakah,
Right.
where
Thank you for
the
the
giver knows
opportunity to
the
give.
recipient.
I never heard that. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. So I know about saying thank you because it allows us to open my heart. And and obviously if I'm walking by a person and I don't have money to give to them, I have to not ignore them, but actually apologize that I can't give them anything. And if all I have is 10 agorot, then as embarrassing as it is to give 10 agorot, and as of likely they're going to throw the 10 agorot back in my face, which they do so often, they're doing me a favor by throwing the 10 agorot back in my face, because that gives me a little humility.
Yeah.
So, and actually my obligation is to give them the 10 agorot, and their obligation at that moment is to grow through that 10 agorot and to say thank you for those 10 agorot, because that's all you had. And obviously I'll come and I'll say, I'm sorry, that's all I have to give. That's another option. I've done that a few times when I didn't have cash and I was standing in front of a shop, in the train shop, there's whatever, and I said, I don't have cash, but I can buy you some lunch, So that's another option of doing it, obviously. A lot of them also accept bid today, so yeah, and thank God. Listen, a couple of years ago, I remember I was thinking the world is moving so fast into the digital world. What are all those beggars going to do? So thank God most of them caught up with, the digital world. And we can, and even though most of us or a lot of us are walking without cash, but I can ask them, can I give you a bit? And if they have a sign in front of them that they have bit, even better, because, nobody likes to have that conversation anyway. So,
Pass by.
right, exactly. So, yeah. So okay. So the Suckle of Rebbe.
What would be the third event?
So the
guy
third is
stole because
so the third so Rav Nachman says the third level is, I just don't see that they stole. I just see that they needed it.
They took what they needed
Right.
rather than stole.
Right.
I see.
That Hashem had made this whole situation, right? That there was one store in Israel, I think, he actually wrote on the shelves, if you need anything, please take it.
I saw that during COVID.
Yeah.
And again early in the war.
Yeah.
Too.
What a level. Wow. Right? And it reminded me, talking of Hasidic stories, it reminded me of the seer of Lublin, who was a shop owner. He did pickles. He made pickles, and he had a pickle shop. And one time somebody broke into his stores and stole his pickles, and and he saw it from the window, and he yelled to the guy, it's not a theft, enjoy the pickles. Like I'm mafkir it to you, I'm giving it to you so you won't have the sin of stealing, right? So the way that story actually came out is that somebody actually heard it, and at some point there was a decree over the Jews. Lublin is Poland, right? Over the Jews there, where they wanted to close, I think, all the Jewish religious studies, all the yeshivas, and the Lubliner Rebbe only knew Yiddish, so he came with this Jewish, more assimilated guy who was a lawyer to speak on his behalf, and the Lublina Rebbe was just sitting there basically, crying. And the governor who they were talking to said, "Why is he crying?" He said, "Because he just can't take the idea that, there's not going to be any Jewish studies for our Jewish children." So he said to him, "Okay, tell me something about this guy, about the Lublina Rebbe." So he told him the story with the pickles. So the governor said, "And you believe that story?" He said, "It doesn't matter if I believe it or not. Do you even, even just having told such a story about a person, is just like way beyond belief, right?" So he said, "You're right. Like, I wish somebody will ever tell a story like that about me one day." Right. So that story actually changed the decree, it touched the governor's heart so deep that it changed the decree, and the Jewish schools weren't closed at that moment.
Mm.
Yeah, unbelievable. So I'm finally, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was with Max and Neil and Ronnie at the hotel, and as I left davening from my granddaughter, I said, I have more money I have to give. So of course I wanted to find somebody who was learning. I just wanted that because I'd give it to somebody else. So as I left there, this is what happened. Rebbe Nachman and his Brezhlovs.
Sent you
So they had
sent
the
you a little
books
kid.
after I gave them the thing, and never, hardly ever did they have English. Okay, so I said, please, do you have English?
Wow.
This is the only one they had left.
Wow.
True happiness.
Wow.
Nice.
So
Talk about a godly story. Yeah. Okay, so back to the Sokolov Rebbe. So the Sokolov Rebbe, who lived 1866 to 1939, and it was a disciple of the Kotzker Rebbe, like I told you. So he every year made a little for Brengen, a little like commotion for the Yortzeit of Moishele the Moishele the water carrier, and Moishele the water carrier was was this also person of like deep search for truth and authenticity. And he said, like, my whole life he would bring water into the shul at like 4 a.m. in the morning, and he would collect it, come back again, sorry, to bring water for mincha, for people to wash their hands both in the morning before shachris and for mincha before davening. And he used to, and Moshe was really, really poor. He really had nothing to feed his family with, and he was so devoted to bringing water to the community to wash their hands. And so the Rebbe would, say, like, today is the Yortzeit of Moshe, the water carrier. And let me tell you why I'm doing like this Yortzeit. Who's Moshe? And he would tell them the story how Moshe would bring the water, and Moshe would always come and say, like, I'm looking for some, people who really pray with their whole hearts. Can you do something about the remote control? I'm freezing.
Yeah, now it's too cold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're in direct
And-
line of,
You're wearing a sweater, so.
Yeah, now I'm finally comfortable.
So he would say, where are people who are really praying, like without, not in that sense that you come so many times to shul and you feel like people came to just click, been here, done that, like when is the davening over? My soup is over cooking on the plata, and whatever my children's is burning. So he would really look for people who are there in the shul because they want to be there, because they want to have an experience with Hashem. And he would say, I walk around the rich one and I can't find one honest person. I walk around the poor ones and I can't find another one rich person. And I work about this and that, and everywhere, and I can't, find, somebody who's like really pouring their heart before Hashem with like true authenticity, true connection. And so and anyway, so before everybody would show up there, Moishela would hide behind the oven after he would put the water there, and he would just pour his heart before Hashem, and he would say, Hashem, please, 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 my whole life I'm so devoted to you. Can one time give me 2,000 rubles just one time in my life so that I can put together a business and feed my family decently. And all these years he was saying, the same prayer again and again, and nothing would happen. And then one morning he comes into the shul before everybody, and he sees on the floor there's an envelope, and he opens up the envelope, and there's 2,000 rubles there. And he can't believe it. He's so excited. He's so happy. He runs back home, and he's the most joyful. He's just thanking Hashem from the bottom of his heart. And the day is just so beautiful, and he treats his family and finally gets a nice, buy of groceries and whatever. And he's so happy. And he thinks, finally, I'm going to fix my family's life. And in the afternoon, he comes to bring the water again, and he sees like this whole commotion in front of the shul. And he says, and he says, what's happening? And he says, you remember Chanala? Chanala had Chanala lost her husband a month ago. And everybody thought that Avramala, her husband, was very rich, but it turned out that he was rich with debts. And so the community put together 2,000 rubles to reestablish her and her children. And she lost it.
A widow.
And he goes into the shul. He's so angry at God. He throws the sitter on the floor. And he goes back home and he puts his head under the pillow and he sobs his life. And he's just so heartbroken. And he says, what kind of God are you to give me 2,000 rubles? You need to take it away from Hanala, the widow? And he's just so angry at God. And he cries and he cries and he cries and cries. And finally, he hears God. He hears his neshama speaking to him. And he says, Moishala, Moishala. The inner voice tells him, Moishala, Moishala. What happened to you? Your whole life you're crying and praying to God. And now when you need God the most, you're turning your back to him. You know what you need to do. You need to go and return the money, right? And he says, unexpectedly, my heart got filled with so much joy for hearing God's voice telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, you think that God's voice is costing 2,000 rubles or God's voice value is 2,000 rubles? He says God's voice value is so much more than 2,000 rubles. He says he says that filled me up so much more than knowing that, I can reestablish my family, hearing God's voice. So talk about true authenticity, right? And true search of Hashem, and this is what we give over to our children. We don't give, like today everybody's talking about manifesting and magnetizing good life and whatever, But that's not the deepest depth. This is not what the Jewish people is all about. This is not the monotheism that we brought into the world. This is not the God that we brought into the world. The godliness that we brought into the world is that really deep, deep, deep search of truth. On the three layers that we spoke about, like Reb Nachman says, of truth and the truth of the truth and shalom, we have to search for it and search deeper and be so grateful to Hashem that He talks to us, even if the answer is not completely to our favor and flavor, right? Yeah. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Chaim.
Yes.
Yes, your cloth.